All right, strap in everyone, because today we're diving deep into something pretty wild, cryonics.
Cryonics.
Yeah, that whole idea of like hitting pause on death
Right.
and preserving your body in the hopes of like
Yeah.
being revived in the future when technology has like caught up.
Yeah.
So we're going to break down the science, the big questions surrounding this whole controversial idea, all based on the research that you gave me.
Well, what's really interesting is cryonics is kind of moving out of the realm of just like pure science fiction and more into like actual scientific exploration, even if there's debate and skepticism.
For sure.
It's based on this idea that like legal death, like the stopping of the heartbeat and breathing isn't necessarily the like absolute end of a person's existence.
Okay.
Cryonicists believe that if you can preserve the body and like crucially the brain at super low temperatures, future tech might be able to repair any damage and essentially like restart life.
So we're not talking immortality, but more of a potential way to like bridge the gap to a time when medical science can handle things that are currently impossible.
Exactly. And there are companies around the world already offering this service.
Wow.
Alcor in the US is like the biggest player.
Okay.
With almost 200 patients cryopreserved.
Wow.
And over 1,600 more signed up.
Oh, wow.
You've also got Cryonics in Russia, Yinfeng in China, and the Cryonics Institute also in the US.
Okay.
All kind of vying for a spot in this, like, let's call it an unconventional life extension market.
So it's like a race against time, not just for the individual, but for the whole field.
Yeah.
So let's walk through what actually happens when someone decides to take this leap.
Sure. So let's say someone has chosen cryopreservation and their legal death is declared.
Okay.
A specialized team from the cryonics company, in Alcor's case, they call it a stabilization team.
Okay.
Immediately gets to work. Their top priority is to prevent any further damage to the body.
Right.
Particularly the brain, which is extremely vulnerable to oxygen deprivation.
Makes sense. Yeah, every second counts at this point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The team acts fast, using ice baths and circulating like ice cold water throughout the body to rapidly cool it down.
Interesting.
They even use spaces like the nasal passages and the stomach cavity.
Oh, wow.
For internal cooling, this buys them time to transport the patient to the cryonics facility for the main procedure.
And that's where the cryoprotectants come in, right?
Yes.
The anti-freeze solutions.
Exactly.
That's always the thing I think about. It makes me think of like a sci-fi movie, but it's real science happening right now.
It is. These cryoprotectants are specially formulated chemicals that are crucial for preventing ice crystal formation, which would be disastrous.
Yeah.
At the cellular level, as the body is cooled to ultra low temperatures, imagine your car's antifreeze.
Yeah.
But instead of just protecting your engine, it's protecting every single cell in your body.
So it's not just about freezing, it's about freezing in a way that doesn't cause catastrophic damage.
Yes.
What happens next?
The next step is called vitrification. It's more than just freezing.
Okay.
It's about transforming the body into a glass-like state.
Okay.
Imagine cooling like honey or syrup.
Yeah.
It gets thicker and thicker, but doesn't form sharp, jagged ice crystals.
Yeah.
That's what vitrification aims to do with the human body.
Okay. I'm starting to get the picture. So they replace the blood with these cryoprotectants and carefully cool the body down to this vitrified state.
Yeah.
Then where do they keep these glass people for potentially centuries?
They're stored in giant steel tanks called dewars.
Dewars, okay.
Which are like super insulated thermoses filled with liquid nitrogen.
Okay.
These dewars keep the bodies at a stable -196 degrees C, the temperature of liquid nitrogen.
Wow.
Essentially putting them on hold potentially indefinitely.
It's incredible to think that this is all happening right now, not in some distant future.
It's pretty wild.
But let's address the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Does this whole thing actually have a chance of working?
That's the million-dollar question, and unfortunately there's no easy answer.
Right.
The science behind reviving a cryopreserved person is still very much unproven and highly experimental.
Okay.
There's a lot of skepticism in the scientific community, with many experts viewing cryonics as more of a long shot than a guarantee.
So it's a bet on future technology.
Kind of, yeah.
What are the main concerns or doubts that scientists have?
One major hurdle is that we currently don't have a proven way to reverse the biological process of death.
Okay.
even if we could perfectly preserve the brain.
Right.
There's no guarantee we could restore its function after being frozen for decades or centuries.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are there any scientific studies supporting the idea, or is it all just speculation and hope at this point?
There have been some interesting studies, but it's crucial to understand this field is still in its very early stages.
Sure.
One example that you provided involved Ken Hayworth, a neuroscientist who was actually a member of Alcor at one point.
Oh, really?
He conducted research that raises some red flags about the current methods used in cryonics.
Okay, this is where it gets interesting. Tell me more about Hayworth's work.
So Hayworth founded the Brain Preservation Prize to encourage research into brain preservation techniques.
Okay.
What he found was quite concerning, even when animal brains were preserved. Using methods similar to those used in cryonics,
Right.
under like the absolute best laboratory conditions,
Right.
there was significant shrinkage and damage.
So even if we could revive a cryopreserved brain, there's a chance it wouldn't be intact.
Potentially, yeah.
That's a pretty major concern.
It is, and it highlights the complexities of preserving something as delicate as a human brain.
Right.
Even with advanced techniques, Hayworth himself actually suggests a different method called aldehyde-stabilized cryopreservation,
Okay.
which he believes might be able to preserve the brain's neural connections intact.
So there's potential for improvement in the preservation.
Yeah.
Methods themselves?
There is, but there's a catch with this particular method.
Okay.
Ideally, it would need to be performed while a person is still alive.
Oh, wow.
Which obviously opens up a whole new set of ethical considerations.
That's a really tough one. It's like a double-edged sword, a potentially better preservation method.
Right.
But with huge ethical implications.
Huge. Yeah.
Where do other scientists stand on this? Are there any strong counter-arguments to Hayworth's ideas?
Yes, there are. Ken Miller, a professor of theoretical neuroscience at Columbia University, has a very different perspective.
Okay.
He believes that understanding how the brain works is still thousands of years away,
Thousands of years, wow.
and that in its current form, cryonics is essentially a pipe dream.
So we have Hayworth, who's cautiously optimistic about future preservation methods,
Right.
and Miller, who thinks we're nowhere near
Yeah.
ready to make cryonics a reality.
Wow.
Seems like the jury is still out on whether this is a viable path to a second life or just like a scientifically unfounded gamble. One thing's for sure, though, it's a topic that makes you think about the big questions
Absolutely.
about life and death.
For sure.
Yeah, it really is a topic that like sparks a lot of debate and just, makes you question what we know about life and death. But putting the scientific hurdles aside for a moment,
Yeah.
I'm curious about like the people who are actually signing up for this. What kind of person is like, sign me up, freeze me until the future figures things out?
That's a great question, and it's easy to kind of jump to conclusions about who those people might be.
Right.
But when you actually dig into the motivations of the people who choose cryonics, the common thread seems to be hope.
Hope. Okay.
The future technology will be able to overcome things that are currently impossible, reversing death, curing diseases that are now incurable.
So it's not necessarily about living forever, but about buying time until medical science catches up.
In a way, yeah, you could think of it like a very high-stakes insurance policy.
Okay.
Some people see cryonics as a hedge against dying before we make major breakthroughs in life extension. It's a gamble, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's a gamble on the potential of human ingenuity to eventually conquer even death itself.
And I imagine there's an emotional component to this as well, like the hope of maybe reuniting with loved ones who have passed away, or the chance to experience a future that we can only imagine today.
Absolutely.
That must be a powerful motivator.
Yeah, but cryonics also raises a whole host of ethical and philosophical questions that we can't ignore.
Right.
For instance, what does it really mean to be dead?
Yeah.
Is it simply the absence of a heartbeat and breathing?
Okay.
Or is there something more to it?
Right.
And if we could revive someone who has been cryopreserved,
Yeah.
what would their identity be like?
Right. Would they still be the same person they were before?
Exactly. These are questions that philosophers and neuroscientists have been wrestling with for centuries.
Yeah, we're talking about uncharted territory here.
Totally.
And let's not forget the potential societal impact if cryonics were to become widely available and successful. It could completely revolutionize our understanding of life and death.
It would be a complete paradigm shift.
Yeah, imagine a world where death is no longer seen as inevitable,
Right.
but as a potentially temporary setback.
Exactly. And it's both exciting and a little bit terrifying to think about the possibilities.
Oh, for sure.
And it's not just about the individual who's being cryopreserved either.
Right.
We have to consider the potential ripple effects across society.
Yeah.
On healthcare.
Yeah.
On social structures, on our belief systems even.
It could redefine what it means to be human.
It really could.
Okay, so we've talked about the hope, the ethical dilemmas, the potential societal upheaval.
Yeah.
But let's get practical for a minute. How do these cryonics companies plan to, like, sustain themselves and care for their patients for what could be centuries? Is it just like blind faith in future technology, or is there some long-term planning involved?
It's actually quite interesting how they approach this challenge. Alcor, for example, has something called a patient care trust. A portion of the fees they collect goes into this trust, and it's invested.
Got it.
To ensure the long-term maintenance of their cryopreserved patients.
So they're not just hoping for the best, they're actually planning for the long haul.
Exactly. They're taking steps to ensure financial stability for potentially centuries to come. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. The majority of Alcor's investment board members are contractually obligated to have their families cryopreserved.
Wow, that's a serious commitment.
Yeah.
It's like they're putting their money where their cryonics chamber is.
You could say that it's a unique strategy that aligns their interests directly with the company's success.
Yeah.
They're not just investors.
Right.
They're stakeholders in the future they're trying to create.
That's a level of dedication you don't see every day. Have there been any, like, legal or financial challenges to this kind of long-term planning? I imagine things get complicated when you're dealing with timescales that stretch over generations.
There have been some interesting cases, particularly around inheritance and the legal rights of people who are cryopreserved.
Makes sense.
For example, some wealthy individuals have set up something called revival trusts.
Revival trusts.
To manage their assets while they're cryopreserved.
Okay.
Ensuring they have financial resources when and if they're revived.
That sounds like something straight out of a science fiction novel, but it also raises questions about, like, fairness and equity.
Right.
If cryonics ever does become a reality, will it only be accessible to the wealthy? Will we end up with a situation where only the elite get a shot at a second life?
That's a crucial question, and it's one that we as a society will need to grapple with as this technology, if it ever does, matures.
It's a lot to think about. We've covered the science, the hope, the ethics, the finances.
Yeah.
It's clear that cryonics is a very complicated and multifaceted topic.
For sure.
With no easy answers.
It truly is. It's a realm where science fiction kind of blurs with reality.
Yeah.
And the boundaries between life and death become incredibly fuzzy. It's a topic that demands careful consideration and a willingness to engage in some serious philosophical pondering.
Well said, and maybe a little bit of cautious optimism too, right?
Yeah.
After all, we're talking about the potential to push the boundaries of human existence in ways that were once unimaginable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a topic that really gets the imagination going, makes you rethink what's possible. You know, we've explored so many different sides of cryonics, the science, the companies involved, the motivations of the people who choose it, ethical questions, societal impact. It seems like there are more questions than answers at this point.
Yeah, that's the nature of exploring something so groundbreaking and frankly mind-blowing. But even with all the unknowns, I think it's important to acknowledge just the audacity of this whole thing.
Yeah.
We're talking about pushing the limits of what it means to be human, to be alive.
Like we're standing at the edge of this huge uncharted territory, and cryonics is this potential bridge to that, Right.
And with that in mind, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought-provoking question to consider. If the technology were to become available, would you choose to be cryopreserved?
Whoa, it's putting us on the spot.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I have an answer to that one.
It's a decision that would require a lot of reflection. Would you take that gamble knowing that revival isn't guaranteed and the world you wake up to could be vastly different from the one you left behind?
I mean, on the one hand, the chance to see the future unfold, potentially witness, the eradication of diseases that plague us today, and maybe even reconnect with loved ones who have passed away, it's incredibly tempting.
It is a captivating possibility, but on the other hand, there's so many unknowns. What if the revival process doesn't go as planned? What if you wake up to a world that's hostile or disorienting? What if you're essentially a stranger in a strange land, cut off from everything and everyone you knew?
And what about the ethical questions we talked about earlier? Like, would it even be fair to burden future generations with the responsibility of caring for people, revived from a distant past? It's a decision with some really heavy implications.
Yeah. It is. And ultimately, the decision of whether or not to choose cryonics is a deeply personal one, based on individual beliefs, values, hopes for the future.
It's not a choice to be made lightly, but the fact that we're even having this conversation, is a testament to human curiosity, our drive to explore the unknown, and that persistent hope for a future where we might just transcend our current limitations.
Yeah, it's a future that's full of possibilities, both exhilarating and daunting, and whether cryonics ultimately proves to be like a viable path to a second life, or a fascinating footnote in the history of science. The questions it raises about life, death, and the nature of human existence are sure to continue to intrigue us for generations to come.
Well, that's it, folks. Our deep dive into the fascinating, controversial, often mind-boggling world of cryonics.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the science behind it to the ethical and societal implications.
We encourage you to continue exploring this topic, do your own research, engage in thoughtful discussions, and most importantly, form your own informed opinions.
And until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of our world.